Farrat tries to give him some breathing room, and he's going to take a shot deep downfield, and open is Bernard Berrien, and the former Bear will go 99 yards for a touchdown.
Manning on 3rd and 10. He fires, and the catch is made by Cruz, who breaks free. One man to beat. Victor Cruz down the sideline. 99 yards from Manning to Cruz.
Wes Welker pulling away, and he ties an NFL record with a 99-yard touchdown. Andre Davis, and Davis will score 99 yards. Wow.
Hello and welcome to 99 Yards, American football for UK fans. I'm your host Liz Bendari, and joining me is Shona Duthie, Kadeen Simmons and Duncan Terry.
Hi.
I was expecting you to say your maiden name and completely forgot that since we last recorded.
Yeah, it's really confusing me as well. But gotta get used to it at some point.
Yeah, we do.
So as we all know, it's the London games at the moment, with Eagles and Jaguars kicking off at Wembley on Sunday afternoon. I thought a good way to start the show would be for each of you to share your experience of the London games so far. And so with that, I've got 3 questions I'd like to ask each of you. What do you think has worked well and what not so? What are your thoughts on the matchup so far? And finally, what has been your favourite moment up to now?
Well, I think what I think hasn't worked well would be the Club Wembley in the Seahawks-Raiders game. Purely, I think, I'm not quite sure what actually happened, but basically Club Wembley season ticket holders weren't able to get into any of the pubs. I know that's not really about the game experience, but if you're paying that little bit more extra money, like to get that experience in Club Wembley, that you kind of win it. And don't think that's actually the NFL's fault. I think it's the way Wembley ran it. But that was the thing that I didn't like. I still don't understand why the Titans went for the 2. I've been saying it all week. I even spoke to people in work about it. None of us have a clue. Because I was so ready for overtime because it was such a good matchup, and I actually think the Titans probably would have gone on to win it because I thought their defense was a lot better in the second half than it was in the first compared to the Chargers. I kind of thought the Chargers were running out a little bit of steam. But my favourite moment, I think, has to be watching Seahawks at Wembley. Like, just seeing Russell Wilson and seeing the whole team. And it was kind of a boring game if you were a neutral, but as a Seahawks fan, I thought it was amazing.
I don't sit in Club Wembley, so I can't comment on what you experienced. But from what I saw on Twitter, that was a really bad experience. And I'm not quite sure what it was like the second game, but I think that's surely something they need to look at going forward. One thing that hasn't worked for me, and this is just again a personal experience, is I've noticed quite a few fights during games.
Yeah, I have actually.
And that's the first time I've seen that. Like, I think this is my 3rd or 4th year as a season ticket holder, and the people I sit around have been really, really nice people, no trouble whatsoever.
Yeah.
But during the first game, there seemed to have been these 2 guys from Birmingham who spent the first half basically swearing at these Raiders fans in front of them, to the point where at half time they got kicked out for starting a fight with these guys.
Really?
And then last week, but a couple of rows down to my right, there were. It didn't quite get to like fist thrown or anything like that, but clearly something had gone on and people weren't too happy. And luckily enough, it didn't start off in a fight. But I don't know, the crowd this year seems to be different. I think you've seen a few more, I wouldn't say hardcore fans, but kind of people who are like, you know what, I have nothing better to do on a Sunday. I might as well go to the NFL games and aren't really there to watch the game, kind of just want to start trouble. But the games have been fine. Just, the people that have attended this year have been a bit poor, to kind of put it nicely.
See, it's interesting to say that. My thought about what I've enjoyed has been the people. I don't know whether that's because I was lucky enough to grab Jono's ticket, and he's in the POS section. Very him. But I was chatting to the guys to the left of me, and he's a new fan. He doesn't really have a team. He just came along because he's a fan of sports. And just together we picked a team. I said obviously not the Patriots. There we go. And by the end of the game, he's a Jets fan. So that was quite good fun. On the other side of us, we had a lady from Seattle whose friend was over the other side of the stadium. That's just the tickets they could get. And we had a lot of chat about, the experience here and the experience there and how they compare. Yeah, it was great fun. The matchups, for me, the Seahawks matchup was fantastic just because we won. Obviously, not one for the purist, but that last game was fantastic, wasn't it? It was just a great display of football. And good on Vrabel for giving it a go. If he wins, he's a hero, and if he doesn't, everyone's like, what on earth has he done? But apart from the building site around Wembley, which obviously hampers everyone getting around at the moment, which is no one's fault. People got to build. Great experience so far.
Sorry, you kind of touched upon that last game. There was obviously going into the Chargers-Titans game, there was a lot of massive point being made about, kind of blowouts we've been getting. I think before that, the average win margin was like 26.2 points. And a lot of people were kind of complaining about that, saying, oh, this isn't fun to watch and blah, 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 blah. But for me, I was like, well, do you know what? One team is going to win, and okay, yeah, you might like a 17-20 shootout, but how can you complain about one team just being utterly dominant, especially if that's your team?
Yeah.
I kind of didn't quite get it. I kind of wanted to know what you guys thought about that.
Well, I'd never ever hold that against anyone. These teams are booked around April time, March, April, May. This time last year, you would never have put, say, the Dolphins and Browns together. But right now, they've been an incredible game. You'd love to watch that. So, what can you do? Really, nothing. These sides build themselves in the off-season and they come to Wembley just completely different to where they were last season. You just got to go and, with an open mind.
Keeping on the theme of the London Games, earlier today, Duncan and I had the opportunity to interview Alistair Kirkwood, Managing Director of NFL UK. One of the things we talked around was around the future of NFL here in London. Here's what he had to say. Thank you for joining the 99 Yards podcast. How have you been?
I'm probably 1 yard away from a touchdown.
Well, obviously it's a busy time for you at the moment. You're in the middle of the international series. What does an average day involve for you at the moment?
There's no such thing as average, so I'll tell you that first of all. There's also no such thing as a game week that's the same. Because although the public will see it as 3 Wembley games back to back, you've got 6 different teams. They're all structured very differently. They have different routines. Their head coaches are very different characters and personalities. What they look for out of a trip obviously starts with a win, but then all the details behind it are very, very different. So it's really important on us that we treat every single game week as the most special one. We've got 3 teams this season that are coming over for the first time, haven't played an international regular season game before. So for them, they quite rightly don't care that we've done 20 odd before. They want their one to be the best possible. So I think that's the first thing I'd say. And we've got quite a high proportion of West Coast teams this year, so a lot more travel considerations. The Chargers, as an example, last week when Mike Vrabel decided to go for the 2-pointer, they probably had a mixture of both nerves and pleasure when seeing that, because nervousness as to whether the Titans go up or not, but then pleasure insofar as the logistics guys knew that there was a curfew at LAX as to what time they could get back by, and we were under the gun in terms of minute by minute how we get them out of the stadium, how we clear traffic, how we get to the airport for them to get on a plane. And if they'd gone to overtime, that all those plans would have been for nothing, and we'd have had some other issues as a result. So I just use that as an anecdote to show that you're just adjusting to everything on the fly, even though we may have planned for months ahead. There's always things that you can't expect, and there's always curveballs that come out.
That's a phenomenal story about the Chargers. That just goes to overtime. Maybe they miss their plane. That's just it's crazy, isn't it?
Particularly if you then lose the game as well. If they lose the game and you've got to stay an extra night.
Yeah, crazy. With the Seahawks and Raiders, obviously broke the attendance record last week. I'm sure you are thrilled, but at the same time, maybe still disappointed that the new Tottenham ground wasn't ready. Do you have sort of mixed emotions or some relief that you were able to accommodate all the fans that wanted tickets?
Well, I'm obviously pleased for all the fans that could go. I think this. Maybe I'll use your podcast to try and give a bit more context.
Yes.
Because I know that all of our games were heavily in demand, and there was a lot of concern about capacity issues at Spurs compared to Wembley. And I could, I saw on social media a lot of people quite rightly expressing frustration because if you want to go to the game, you want to be able to make sure that you can go to the game. So I have every sympathy with regards to that. The reality, though, is that we have scheduling challenges going forward because we don't own our own stadium. So if your starting point is that you need to be able to offer a team a bye week the week after, and I think there's been a couple of teams in the history of the London series that have not chosen to take their bye week, so almost everybody else does. Then you're looking at it and going, right, the very first week that you can play a game is week 3, which would be really unpopular with teams because they don't want to have early bye weeks. And the latest is probably week 10 or week 11, being the last week that you can have a bye week. So if you're playing and committed to doing 4 games a year going forward, which we are, then you have a limit as to the number of weeks where you can play games. If you've got that as your situation, then you need to have flexibility in your scheduling because we schedule ahead of the Premier League, for example, and there's also some Wembley events that will take place and get confirmed afterwards after we've booked the venues ourselves, like the Joshua fight, etc.
Yeah.
So I understand and appreciate why fans will get frustrated and go, well, one venue's got 61,000, the other has got 84,000. But there's 2 things to consider. One is we need to have schedule flexibility to play as many games as we want to and give ourselves the best chances of being able to do that. And then secondly, the Spurs experience will be a completely different experience to a Wembley experience. I'm not saying good or bad because till we play it, then people will be able to decide once that's taken place. But the whole idea of having a field underneath a Premier League field, having our own locker rooms as opposed to doing large-scale kit-outs in existing stadium like we've had to do with Wembley and Twickenham, and the team experience will be very different from any other games we played. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I wasn't that moved one way or the other as to whether we played at Spurs this year or at Wembley because almost all of it was with our control. It's not our stadium to build, and all the challenges and issues that come with anything that's built with such vision and ambition means that we just had to wait like everybody else to see what happens. But we will have to play games on an ongoing basis, and sometimes it'll be lower capacity stadiums, and other times it'll be bigger capacity. But it's because the core of it is we don't own our own stadium.
Absolutely. So while in an ideal world you'd love to accommodate as many fans as you possibly could, so looking into the future, it's more about being able to just accommodate teams at the right times and in the right places. It's more about the logistics for you, isn't it? And that's obviously so important.
Yeah. The most important thing, there are two things that are beyond anything else. The most important thing is that the teams come over. Logistically, everything works really well, and no one thinks that they lost a game because of the logistics, the operations, or the environment. So you want it to be to the extent that a team feels like they were given a competitive chance. And so there's an awful lot of work that's done in the year, in the build-up. There's 3 or 4 visits by the operations folks of the teams over to London. There's 2 or 3 visits from this office, from operations people over here, to go to theirs to understand how the team operates and what's actually involved.
Yeah.
So that is key consideration. The second is fan experience and trying to do as good a job by the fans, because without the fan support, we wouldn't have games. And so I am incredibly sensitive to the fact that people will get frustrated that they might not be able to get tickets. But I guess in the broadest sense, it's a better problem to have than nobody coming to games.
Well, absolutely, yeah.
So looking back at week 1 of the London Games, the Seahawks fans, they almost took over Wembley, which was really entertaining for everyone. But was there any feedback from the Raiders, given that they were supposed to be the home team?
I think it's a discovery for everybody when they come to the games. So when you buy a ticket, you don't say who you support. So you can't necessarily tell. We knew that every team has the opportunity of selling allocations to local fans. We've always had that in place. Very few have sold their full allocation in the past, and we're still talking about 1.5-2% of the stadium. But for the home team, you give the right to season ticket holders who are losing a game, so that if they wanted to make the trip, they could do. And for the away team, they get a lower allocation, but still an opportunity. So we knew that Seattle had sold out their allocation. There were also a lot of German fans over that had bought individually for the game. And I think the other thing was that because, as you'd earlier pointed out, the game had been displaced from Spurs, we ended up having a whole load of tickets being sold with 5 weeks to go before the game. And I think maybe some of the buying habits were slightly different from when we would normally sell February, March, April time. So I think a lot of those things conspired to ensure that the Seattle fan base kind of came out and mobilized. The other thing is, this is the first time Seattle had been over. So the Raiders have been over, 3 times before, 3 times in total. So I think there's something about a first time. I think it's going to be interesting to see this Sunday. We kind of got something very similar with Philadelphia fans who like to come out and cheer their team as well. That's going to be interesting because obviously the Jags have grown their fan base in the UK, and they also, for a lot of fans, given their regularity of coming over, have been adopted as people's second favourite team. But they're going to go up against a team that will be really well represented in the stadium as well. And so it'll be interesting to see what the atmosphere is like.
There was quite a lot of feedback from fans about ticket sales and reseller sites this season. There's some news about some fans ending up severely out of pocket without tickets due to scams. Obviously, there's some news about websites being closed down, but do you have any plans to make changes? Some people say perhaps a system like Glastonbury where people register photos for their tickets. Are there any plans in the pipeline?
This is always a difficult one to answer because you don't want to give all the details of all the things that you're working on, because touts in particular are pretty smart and listen to things, and then are usually one step ahead of us. So I'll talk in vague terms a little bit, but as long as you understand the context of why I'm doing it like that. So we have systems in place to observe irregularities in purchasing. So particularly around season tickets, we we did not process something like 3,500 season tickets that we got purchased in February because of irregularities that we spotted. And I won't go into it, because once they know what we're looking for, then they'll actually stop doing that, and then they'll come up with something else. It's not illegal to buy and sell on in the UK other than for Premier League games, so we don't have the law behind us. So an awful lot of our efforts need to be kind of done by ourselves, and we don't want touts to be in business around our games. A, because it's not fair on the fans, and B, there's also no guarantee that people will actually turn up for the games. And ultimately we want great atmosphere and sold out games. Things like the Glastonbury idea, and I've had a couple of people contact me with those kind of concepts, make a lot of sense, but in practice, based on the type of game day that we actually have, will add other issues to it. So if I look at enhancements that we've done for the stadium experience in the last couple of years, when we've done them for security reasons rather than for this, things like the clear bag policy, which in the first year was a real challenge, because even though we messaged every single ticket buyer and texted and tried to communicate, still lots of people that didn't know the context of it or came in with bags. If you enforce something and it doesn't work out, particularly in the first year, you will have potential problem. Secondly, Wembley has substantially got built up from those of your listeners that have gone to games in the early years. It's almost unrecognizable in terms of number of high rises that are around, etc. There's less and less space for us. It makes tailgate increasingly difficult for us in terms of space where we can actually put those things on as well. And queues and bottleneck queues become health and safety issues. So if you put in a policy in place that creates bottlenecks or slow things down appreciably, particularly as around about half the fan base that go to games come in the last 35, 40 minutes. So you got a whole load of people that come in early and then a whole load of people that come in late. You could end up with, unless you actually had it in place in a way where it worked seamlessly, you could end up creating more problems. Now, somewhere like Glastonbury, it's not, you don't have people all coming in at exactly the same time, and it may not be absolutely critical if you miss a little bit or part of something. Whereas with us, I think it would dramatically affect the fan experience.
Yeah.
So we will continue to look at what we do. I'm not in this long-winded answer saying no to it. I'm just saying that it's not as simple and straightforward as let's actually put a policy in place, because what you might be trying to do is solve for one thing and then actually creating a whole load of other issues. So it's going to be really, we got to keep weighing what we do with, are you actually going to affect negatively something else?
Yeah. That all makes perfect sense, everything you said, and I can tell there's something that's on your radar, but that you can't sort of speak too much about the finer details. So thank you for that.
There's obviously been a lot of chat around a UK franchise. Does the Wembley sale falling through harm any plans at all for that?
The honest answer, Liz, is I have absolutely no idea. I wasn't involved in Shad Khan's decision to put in the offer, and not really involved in any of the plans around it. Certainly, I wasn't aware of anything out there that said that, despite the media speculation, that him owning that stadium would actually lead to anything else. There'd be no internal conversations. I think it's ultimately a good thing in terms of growth of our sport that an owner would consider trying to buy the national stadium. I don't think him owning it would mean that that would lead to a franchise, and I think there's so many other steps and so many other considerations, and also all the work that Shad's doing in Jacksonville as well. So So I was probably as bemused an onlooker as anybody else in terms of what does it mean and what's involved.
Sure.
And when he withdrew his offer, I didn't know about it before it was out there in the public. So for one thing that I do know for sure is that every single year we've been doing this, I have not forecasted successfully what's going to happen next. So I didn't know when we were going to multiple games the year before that we'd go to multiple games. Certainly didn't know the year before we invested in the Spurs Stadium that we were going to do that, or that we were going to move to Twickenham, or that we'd ever do triple back-to-back games. Mm-hmm. So whilst I'm the closest to it, I may actually be the worst person in terms of forecasting how things work out. And kind of just go with the flow and see, take the positives out of everything.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, we found out that the Chargers might not be that happy in Los Angeles, and there was a lot of talk about them becoming a UK team. But there's one team in the Raiders who are actually homeless next year. If they called you up at the beginning of the off-season and wanted to spend the year here, would you be able to cope with that? Would you be ready for that?
I think my starting point for all of this is you've got to have a can-do attitude. So when we played the very first game in 2007, we were told that we wouldn't play a game for another 4 years if we did well. So the next game would be in 2011, and the one after that would be 2015. Then we got lucky enough to be asked, do you want to do another game in 2008? I was like, sure, let's bring it on. When we were asked, do you want to do 2 games a year? Absolutely, let's do it. Do you want to move to a Spurs stadium? Why not? Because what we're trying to do has never been done before, and what we've got as an office is a real privilege to deal with very valuable real estate in regular season games, and they're competitive games that matter, and they're incredibly important to each team. And so you always go back to the answer to my first question, value them as importantly as the teams would. My starting point to any situation is, if you're going to offer me more, New York, I'll absolutely take it on if you want us to. So because I think by challenging ourselves is the only way that we actually learn. So if it was either of those 2 scenarios or anything else, take it on, and then hopefully bring the fan base with us.
Absolutely. It's what Richard Branson says, isn't it? He says, if you get offered an opportunity, say yes and then learn how to do it. So why not? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because if you decline them, you just know that you're not going to get the next opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that the announcement for next year's games should be made next April. Is that right?
I think, I don't know absolutely for certain whether it's a set date. I think it's kind of similar to last year at least, that we will confirm dates and times around the regular season schedule. There's a chance that we may announce matchups like we did last year earlier than that. We're nowhere close at the moment internally to having that decided, so I'm not teasing you, but something will happen in the next few weeks. But I wouldn't be surprised if we announced matchups first and then came up with finer details later. But I think it is important that the schedule kind of gets normalized. When we first started, when we were just 1 game a year, we were a novelty for the season scheduler, and probably both the most interesting and complex job in the whole NFL is the guys that actually work on the schedule, because they're trying to keep so many variables and so many people happy. Once we've gone to, let's say 4 games a year where you've got 8 teams that are involved, and then you have fixed variables that come as part of it, where the team that's coming over would want a bye week the following week, and also wants to have a say in the week before. So a West Coast team might want to play on the road on the East Coast to have a shorter travel time, or another team might actually want to play at home so that they can actually leave from their own place to London and start their training and game planning in their own facility rather than have to train further. Once you actually think about it in those terms, and you go, right, there's 8 teams, and we are actually already defining 3 weeks of the schedule for 8 teams, we're reducing a ton of flexibility for the scheduler. He has to basically set up the rest of the schedule around us because we're the only ones that have actually completely confirmed. So as we move to multiple games, the negotiations internally as to when we could announce and how we could announce became much more challenging. And the starting point was we didn't know whether by announcing late it was going to be a problem and a challenge for kind of fan base, etc. But because we're now committed to playing so many games, I think it's the right thing to do for everybody, even although I know that those of us that are impatient and want to know as much as possible and look forward to next year would like to know in advance. It's the right thing by the league, and therefore we're going to do that.
As it stands right now, there are 3 teams that have never played in London, being the Houston Texans, Green Bay Packers, and the Carolina Panthers. Are you in touch with them at all? Are you hoping to get them over for their first UK games anytime soon?
I'm always hoping. I mean, but if you look at it this year, we got 3 teams over that hadn't been before, and it's not an accident. It was certainly something that we were trying to do. I think there's 2 or 3 things that you need to look at with this. So the first one is, it starts off with the home team. So who's the home team? So let's say because it's not going to sound like an exclusive, let's say it's the Jags, since we know that they're going to be over next year. You know their schedule in terms of who their opponents are that will be coming to visit their stadium. So you've got the division, AFC South division. Then you have 4 other teams that have already been selected based on how the schedule has been laid out 4 years in advance. And then you have 1 wild card, which is a matching one. So I can't remember offhand Jacksonville's 2019, but let's say it was the NFC East. So if the Jags finished 3rd in the division, they would then end up playing, let's say, the Redskins if they finished 3rd. So that would then call out all late. So you know by the end of the regular season the identity of all 8. If you wanted to try and get the Carolina Panthers, and the Panthers weren't on the Jags schedule, nor anybody else's that were in consideration to be a home team, you just can't get the Panthers. So therefore, doesn't matter how much you want it, you can't have it that year.
Yeah.
Then the other consideration is, let's say the Panthers were on the Jags schedule and you wanted to go after them. The Jags, under our rules, have the ability to protect 1 game in their schedule. So if they were to say, no, it's really important for whatever reason that Cam Newton comes into Jacksonville rather than go to London, we're going to protect that game. Doesn't really matter how badly you want it, you're not going to get it. So we will definitely put a disproportionate effort to try and see if we can get those teams to come over, because I think it's a great storyline and also really meaningful in terms of overall league support to be able to get all 32 teams. But it may also be that it won't actually happen. I mean, there have been 2 or 3 times in the last few years where I thought we were going to get the Packers and it just didn't work out. Maybe sometimes the real stories behind the scheduling are as interesting as the matchups themselves.
Amazing, thank you. So Alistair, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and answering all of our questions. We've received a lot of insight there, so it's really, really interesting. Thank you, and good luck with the final game this weekend. My pleasure, and thank you to you guys for your sterling work, and also thanks to all your listeners for supporting us. It's been a really good season so far. Let's hope for a exciting second half of the season. Now, obviously, Alistair talks quite openly and honestly, and he really goes into detail on why things are done the way they are. What are your thoughts on what Alistair had to say?
I found it quite interesting, him talking about ticket touts and that kind of ongoing problem the NFL is facing over in London. Obviously, I can't. When tickets initially went on sale, I know there was a lot of people saying that tickets were sold out, and then being then put online at 2, 3 times, 4 times the price. And it's a really difficult one to manage, as he kind of hinted at, because kind of what can you do? The whole having photos on tickets, yeah, that's great, but stuff comes up. You can buy the ticket in January and then come October or September, whenever the game is, if something happens, you kind of want to be able to sell that ticket on, and I think it's quite harsh. I don't know. I think the way it's run at the moment, while it's not ideal, I can't really think of a better situation given the reasons he said, the bottleneck queues and stuff like that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that point. I mean, on the one hand, what can you do? If they were to put photos on, then you wouldn't be able to take, sun number 2 instead of sun number 1.
Yeah.
Or, if you book them 6 months earlier, suddenly you can't go, you can't sell them to, I can sell them to you. So that would be a bit of a pain. And I completely understand his comment about causing more queues. It was an interesting point. I very much enjoyed his example of the Chargers, talking about if they'd gone to overtime, suddenly they might miss their plane. They might not be able to get into LAX. They're spending another night in the UK because of the time taken for overtime. That was fascinating. And yeah, overall I had a lot of empathy for him, because it sounds like a lot of things are given to him. Here's the problems. Here's what you've got to deal with this time round. And they're sort of just sorting those out rather than creating problems for themselves.
Without an NFL stadium, there's not much they can really do, because like you said, Wembley will have separate events, boxing, concerts, exactly, stuff like that. Tottenham will have Tottenham games. You literally do need a stadium. You can't have an NFL team bouncing between Tottenham and Wembley, so they definitely need a stadium, and that deal collapsing is massive. And I can't see it going to Tottenham either. There's talks that they have to host a team at Tottenham. There is no way Spurs are going to look at it and go, yeah, during the start of our season, we're just going to allow another team to mess up our grass. Okay, no, sorry. Obviously, you've got the 2 different pitches, but
Yeah, I mean, it is purpose built, though, isn't it? I mean, they're obviously thinking about the future, or they wouldn't have invested that sort of money in purpose building it.
Yeah, but I think something else Alistair said was that you're going to have the NFL schedule guys doing the NFL schedule, and then the Premier League schedule doing their schedule months later. And the Premier League really going to sit there and go, well, Tottenham can't play at home this week, and this week because there's an NFL game there, or Tottenham have to play on a Sunday Tottenham have to play on a Saturday because they're playing NFL games on Sunday. And if Spurs are in the Europa League, they have to play on Sundays. So then you've got a situation where trying to fit in Spurs Europa League games on a Sunday and NFL games on a Sunday, it can't be done. So at that point, it has to be Wembley, or the NFL have to build their own stadium, which they will not do.
I think as well that if you were to do the whole football on Saturday and then the NFL on Sunday, I don't actually think that would be enough turnaround time anyway, logistically.
No, I don't think it would be.
Although, in saying that, there's the game on Sunday, and then Monday is Spurs Man City. Now that's going to be a 24-hour turnaround, and that's without 2 separate pitches. That's good, but they're going to have to get rid of the NFL lines and numbers and stuff like that. Get a football pitch ready, and that pitch is going to be awful because in the space of 2 months you've had the boxing, which is you can still see the signs to stuff on the pitch. 3 NFL games and a Premier League game. That pitch is going to be completely ruined. So I think Shahid Khan not getting Wembley kind of does set an NFL franchise back a few years. They were saying, 2022? Unless Khan comes back in and puts another bid in.
Oh, well, there is rumours that he is contemplating it. He's basically studying another offer to go back in. But it just depends, if he actually does do that within the next year. If he takes a while to do it, then there's no way there's going to be something here by 2022.
Yeah, and I think Duncan made the point about having the Raiders in London as well. No, so it was the Chargers. Sorry,
Chargers,
yeah,
because they're homeless next year.
They are homeless. Yeah.
Afterwards,
but again, Chargers kind of need Wembley to be owned by Shahid Khan, because you can't just chuck the Chargers in a stadium where there's going to be, let's say maybe one boxing fight, 2 or 3 concerts, and to be fair, there's no Spurs there, so it's literally just international football. But
they're in a football stadium right now, aren't they?
Yeah, it's going to be. I don't know. I think what was interesting, or what I find interesting anyway, is you get a lot of people kind of saying, "Oh, I don't want an NFL franchise. Just don't have it." And it's kind of like, well, you're not the only person who has a say in this, and okay, you can't go to all 8 home games, but are you telling me you wouldn't want to go to like 2 or 3? Obviously, Duncan, you live in Scotland, and Liz, you're in Manchester and stuff. But between the two of you, like maybe Liz first, how many games do you reckon you could get down to if there is a home team next year in London?
Honestly, I really don't know. Because not only do you need to factor in the game tickets, you've got travel, you've got overnight stay. It's just not worth it to come up and then go home in the same day. It's not worth it, and it'd be really tiring. So I think realistically, 3, maybe 4.
I'm not even sure I would go to a lot of games being here, in all honesty.
And you're in London.
Yeah.
I think that I would love to go to all 8. I think the only way I'd get to all 8 would be if I was reporting on the games. My work would not be like, you can take 8 Sundays off between.
I work every 2 weekends, so there wouldn't be no chance I'd get to go to all 8 games.
I get 2 Sundays off every 8 weeks, so I couldn't go to all 8. But I would like to go there as a reporter. So
hit them up, guys.
There's so much more to come over the next few months, especially if the Chargers can't get home for next season. London will be an option.
Well, the Chargers are moving into the Coliseum, though. No, the new stadium.
It's Raiders that are homeless.
The Raiders that are homeless.
Oh, I keep saying that. Sorry. But someone's going to be homeless next year, and Wembley is going to be sitting there.
I just thought that was an interesting question. If they wanted to, could you do it? And I liked his answer. Just say yes and sort it out afterwards. I like that.
Maybe one thing they could do, if it's just for one season, you have it at Tottenham and Wembley. That way, one stadium isn't.
Yeah.
Thing. Wembley and White Hart Lane aren't that far. They're both in London, so it's not ideal for people outside of London. But if it's a one-off, it's like a guinea pig scenario. Can you get an NFL team in London? And even if it's spread over 2 different stadiums, you can see if it works or not. You can see the fan reaction, you can see the crowd attendance. Obviously, it's 2 different size stadiums, but I don't know. I just think I would like to. I would like to have a franchise, even if I couldn't get to 8 games, because there will be people out there who can't get to 8 games or 4, 5, 6, 7. I wouldn't want to deny them that opportunity, I guess.
Moving on to this week's other big news. It's trade season in the NFL, meaning teams who are doing well are now looking for the player that will send their roster to the top, whereas other teams are probably just happy to capitalise on extra draft places in order to rebuild their team. Is there a particular trade that has caught your eye? And if so, what was it?
Is John Gruden just gone, do you know what, I'm going to go into the Raiders laughing my head off because he's got $100 million for 10 years and I'm just going to strip them of all their assets and just build my own stuff. I just don't even care about the last year in Oakland or the last season. Just going to have some fun because that's basically what he's been doing.
I heard an interesting opinion on a podcast earlier. I can't remember which one it was, but they were saying how maybe he kind of viewing rebuilding this team completely different to how other head coaches, GMs kind of go about it, in the sense that he knows he has 10 years, and whether he lasts the entire 10 years, we don't know yet, but that kind of security allows him to do whatever he wants. And obviously the Khalil Mack trade, no one agreed with that, especially if you're a Raiders fan. If you're a Bears fan, you loved it. The Amari Cooper one, I think he's done really, really well to get a first out of someone who, let's be honest, after his rookie season has kind of been known for just dropping the ball quite a lot. And I think when you know you've got at least 2, 3, 4 years, you can basically blow this team up and rebuild it over that time, as opposed to, someone who comes in on a 4-year deal. You kind of need to hit the ground running within 2 years, or come the second year, you're out of a job. So I think Gruden having that kind of job security has allowed him to basically do what he wants and say, to all the previous head coaches, you guys have done a really bad job. I'm now going to do it my way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Cowboys came out a little bit silly in that deal because, from what I heard in the summer, they wouldn't offer the Seahawks a first for Earl Thomas, but they have offered Raiders a first for Cooper. So I'm not really sure what's going on in the Cowboys camp.
Yeah, the value's not quite right in that one, is it? But yeah, I totally see what you mean.
The thing is, I can see why the Cowboys panicked. This is a team who, outside of Zeke, they have no one to catch the ball. So, if a receiver who I think has been to 2 Pro Bowls, and has got some good plays on tape, why wouldn't you say, do you know what? Yeah, go for a first, because the alternative is maybe winning 4 or 5 games this year, and given how much he's got away with, he might not be in a job next year. So if you're the Cowboys coaching staff, you kind of have to go all in this year. Not all into, win the Super Bowl, but all in to at least go 500, because Jerry Jones is becoming impatient, and if he's not, then he may well want to.
I think the one that really surprised me overall is Damon Snacks Harrison going for a 5th.
Yes.
That's akin to 50p in a packet of biscuits. It just doesn't sit right to me. He's the best defensive tackle, against the run in the league. And what a coup for Detroit. It's a shame we have to play them this weekend. Their run defense really wasn't looking all that solid, and he's going to come in and completely change that for them. And they're playing very well. I think they're 3-3, and they're trying something. And for a 5th round pick, I mean, good on them. They've absolutely robbed New York, and Eli Apple going for a 4th as well. They really aren't getting the value for these players, I don't think.
Those 2 trades remind me very much of the trades Miami made last year with Ajayi and Landry, where everyone was like, you do know you can get more for these players. I'm not quite sure why the Giants are panicking so badly to get, Eli Apple, there's been rumours that he's a bit of an idiot. His plays okay, but, he hasn't quite, he's kind of annoyed a lot of people in the dressing room, but for Snacks Harrison, that's just, there must be more to it. There's no way the Giants have gone, we don't need no more, so take him for a 5th. And if that is the case, there must be a lot of teams, looking at that deal going, why don't we get involved in that? Maybe offer a 4th or something like that.
I don't know whether his contract's up at the end of the year or something. Maybe they've got to re-sign him for quite a lot of money. It just doesn't really make sense to me.
No, yeah, I thought that it was a strange one as well.
And just for a bit of fun, what slightly out there trade would you like to see before the deadline?
I've got one for you. I'll start things rolling. You've got 2 quarterbacks who aren't really doing that well and are probably coming to the point in time where their teams are thinking maybe we have to move on from this guy. A couple of years ago, there were 2 wide receivers. I forget their surnames. They were so ineffectual. Sorry, their first names. They were so ineffectual. It was Jenkins at the 49ers and Baldwin at the Chiefs. And what they did, they said, well, they've done nothing in the last 3 years. Let's swap them, put them in different systems. We can each see if, we can do something with these players. What if they traded Ryan Tannehill and Blake Bortles? Each team, if they can bring something out of the other player, it might be weighted, probably in favour of the Jaguars there, but, probably going to be moved on from anyway. Let's see if we can do something with them.
Duncan, I love you, but can we not give the Dolphins play ball? Whenever I've seen you, we've gotten really, really well. I'm not quite sure if we can start hating you right now. I think the Jaguars would kind of win that trade. I'm a big Tannehill fan. He's not the second coming to Tom Brady or anything like that. But he's more. Blake Bortles might have 1-2 good games, and then the third game he is abysmal. Like, you look at him going,
definitely.
What is wrong with you? It's the fact that, he got benched for Cody Kessler, so don't do that. Don't do that.
Well,
no,
it's out there.
if there's a team who might take Bortles, the Giants, in the sense that it can't get any worse than Eli Manning and Carl Aletta. I don't know, if you go next year, or for the rest of this year and next year, saying, you know what, let's see if we can get Blake Bortles going. It's not going to work. I reckon he's a broken quarterback, and
I find it interesting that Teddy Bridgewater is at the Saints. Like, I mean, he's never going to get a game, after, unless Breeze gets injured. So I'm surprised no one's actually tried to trade for him, because there's a few quarterbacks this season who haven't, lived up to the bill. I mean, in particular, Blake Bortles. Like, what is going on at the Jaguars? Like, why are they, it's not working. And it didn't work when he was even benched for Cody Kessler, and they're saying that they're going to play him Sunday. I find that interesting.
Do you not think the Teddy Bridgewater trade was more thinking long term, in the sense that perhaps there was a conversation during the off season where we said, "This is my last season. Whether we win the Super Bowl or not, I won't be here next year." And they kind of had a look at the next quarterback draft class, which, outside of Justin Herbert and Dwayne Haskins, is awful. And those two might stay another year in college. So if you're one of the many teams that look at a quarterback next year, you are in massive, massive trouble if Justin Herbert doesn't declare. So maybe the Saints said, you know what, let's get Teddy in now, get him used to our system, get him quite cheap, and then there's a natural successor to Drew Brees. That's what I'm thinking behind that trade. Because if not, then it absolutely made no sense.
I mean, I'm not saying like it's a bad point from the Saints' point of view. Like, it's really good from them. I mean, like, in terms of other franchises not having gone for him, because I just feel that there's some quarterbacks that just they're playing, and I actually don't even think Carson Wentz or Nick Foles have had that great a season. Now, I'm not saying someone would come in and play Carson Wentz, but I'm just saying, like, teams' QBs haven't lived up to the standards I expected of them. That's my point.
No, you're right.
Bang on, yeah.
I think there's kind of two. Actually, no, there's quite a few trades I'd like to see. I'm not quite sure in terms of teams, but I think the Cardinals, I think they kind of owe it to Pat Pete and Larry Fitzgerald to let them go, because this team they are so bad. And he came out today and said he's not going, which I thought was quite interesting. Who said that?
Peter State came out. Yeah.
See,
I'd take that with a pinch of salt, though. I mean,
yeah, I think that's more him kind of saying, I'm not going. So when he is traded, he can turn around and go, well, I didn't want to go. They kind of made me, because this team are 2-3 years away from doing anything, and that's even like a winning season. And if you're Pat Pete, you kind of want to go back to playoffs. If you're Larry Fitzgerald, you don't have long left, and do you really want to be sat here with this really, really bad team? I think if those two can find a way to get out, I think there's quite a few more players in that team. Hassan Reddick is barely playing. I reckon he's one who could, he's still on his rookie deal. He's very athletic, very good player. So there'll be some teams who may want, a young linebacker. Same with Deion Buchanan as well. I think the Cardinals could easily blow this entire team up and say, you know what, we're going again.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they've got the quarterback, but not a lot else around him. They've done it the reverse of how other people seem to be doing it at the moment. Other people seem to be building the team and then dropping the quarterback in last, because he's going to be expensive in 4 years' time. Whereas they've got their quarterback and they're going to build around him. It would be nice to see Larry Fitzgerald on a contender, though, for his last year or so.
I feel like the Bills are doing the same though as well, because they've got a good QB, but the rest of their team, I mean, they're just not good either. It's quite interesting to see that quite a few teams are doing that this time around, building around their QB.
I think,
or not.
yeah, it's weird. Again, like, from what a lot of people are saying, I say people, you know, the podcasts I listen to on Twitter and stuff like that, next year's draft class is going to have about 10, 15 players in it. If you're picking, you know, the late first and stuff like that, you're getting nothing for your first round pick.
Yeah.
So perhaps teams are thinking blowing up this year's pointless because the guys we're getting in aren't going to be here in 3-4 years. Again, especially if you're a team who needs a quarterback. So perhaps teams are thinking we'll keep hold of our picks, we'll get through this year, get through next year, and then we go. Which is quite a shame because you don't want 7, 8, 9 teams just treading water for, you know, a season and a half, basically.
So I've just had a question come in over Twitter from the Red Zone UK asking, why are kickers missing so many kicks this year? It seems like more than any in recent memory, kickers are on the firing line for losing games. What do you think's changed?
It's okay, because Janikowski isn't, so it's fine. I've probably jinxed him for Sunday now.
Well done.
I think it's the pressure, isn't it? So many of these games are coming down to the final kick, and how much did that happen before? I mean, you got the Browns knocking on the door for 4 overtime games, and it's really coming down to the last few so much more often that the pressure on the kick is so incredible. They're asking so much more of them than they did 5-10 years ago. And, you know, these are kids at college who are given 3 misses and they're out. So they're not given the chance to develop or grow or learn. There's so many out there in free agency that's really easy to move on. And so I think it's the pressure. I think it's psychological.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of them as well are quite young. Like, if you look at the Browns kicker that was released when he missed those field goals, it's like they're not cutting like older guys normally. It's normally like younger guys because they're like, they did that because, you know, Dan Bailey was still in the market then. Like, stuff like that. Like, if they didn't get Dan Bailey, obviously, but it's, you know, like you say, the free agency is so big that they can just dip into it and get someone that is that more experienced who could handle the pressure.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Janikowski, have you ever seen anyone more relaxed? And that just does feed into it, I think.
I think also part of it is, there's a lot of young kickers. I also think it's, obviously this kind of always happens, but a lot of teams seem to be kind of playing for field goals. And if you kind of imagine you're a kicker on the sideline and you can basically see your team setting up for you to come on and, you know, basically win the game or tie the game. That's a lot of pressure. And if you're a young guy, you know, maybe been in the league 1 or 2 years, and you've got the whole team, you know, over the last 3-4 plays, getting in a position for you to succeed, you must be terrified. And, you know, teams aren't sticking by kickers for a season. You know, 2-3 games. If you haven't, you know, made your kicks, you're out of a job. And how often do you see the same kickers going around over and over again? It's not very likely. You might get maybe 1-2 teams if you're lucky, a third if you're very lucky. So every kick is basically kicking for your job, I guess, and your entire career.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all from us at 99 Yards. I'd just like to say thanks to everyone who listened. If you've got any questions you'd like to send to the team, just tweet them to us at 99 Yards. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.